What's up, everybody? Welcome to the first episode of Materia Junction, and today we're opening up the save file of the Final Fantasy Multiverse. So, first things first, who are we? I am one half of your co-host, the Batmandrew, and I am joined by our other co-host, the Dadman. Normally, if you've seen our content, we've been special guests on each other's shows and podcasts, but today it's all about the joining and the union of two really just beloved Final Fantasy fans who wanted to be able to start a podcast and bring our love for Final Fantasy to you guys. And that's what brought us to do this joint venture here, right? And so we're gonna dive kind of into what that looks like for us. Our origin stories for Final Fantasy, and yeah, just kind of shoot the shit a little bit with each other, and hopefully engage with you guys for our love of Final Fantasy. So this show specifically is talking about not only our love for Final Fantasy, but some of our deep dive theories of the Final Fantasy multiverse, along with where we see the direction of Final Fantasy going. But first things first, our intro here. So listen, every world has a story, and every story has a secret, right? We are the Warriors of Light, and today we're opening up the save file and diving into the deepest mysteries of the Final Fantasy multiverse. Again, this is Materia Junction. So when we got the name is I'm a huge Final Fantasy VII fan. Dadman, you're a huge Final Fantasy VIII fan. And when we were tossing around name ideas, you threw this one out here, man, and I think it stuck. I think this is a great name. So open it up, give me a little intro to you, and man, I'd love for you to kind of talk about your entry into Final Fantasy.
Well, I want to start off by saying thank you for considering me as to being a co-host. I mean, I've loved podcasts in general and long form like content consumption for a very very long time, and I've tried doing several on my own, and it's kind of a different vibe when you're doing your own podcast because essentially you're talking to no one. You're
Yeah.
just hoping that somebody's listening. So it's just like very weird. So the fact that we're here together is really cool because at least we can have a conversation, and it's for our own benefit. Like, and if anybody else seems to just like consume it or enjoy it as well, that's great too. So I just want to say thanks for having me on or like having this partnership with it. Um, and then as far as like Final Fantasy, like I mean, I've been playing Final Fantasy since I was a kid. My earliest inception or my earliest memory was watching my older cousin play Final Fantasy VII, and I was just like, "What game is this? Like, this looks absolutely crazy." It was like nothing I was playing at the time. And then being a '90s kid, like you kind of have to grow into it a little bit because it is a more difficult game. It's not your like traditional like easy platformer like a Mario or like a Sonic Dog. So I feel like there is like a like an entry point into it, um, and which I'm sure we'll talk about at some point here. But yeah, I've been playing since I can remember. I lived through the golden age of Final Fantasy. I'm living through this like lull that we have right now, and hopefully it
Yeah.
gets better. Hopefully it gets better before I disappear. But still, I love it. It's got a really great place in my heart, and it's one of the like go to game franchises that I constantly revisit.
Yeah, listen. Final Fantasy VII was was my entry point into Final Fantasy, same as you, and when I started playing it, I've shared this before on my channel. Um, it it was the game that got me through like working out like my dad passing away, right? And so it had a special place in my heart. And then you fast forward to the remake. The remake actually did the same thing when my mom passed away, oddly enough,
Mm,
right? So Final Fantasy is near and dear to my heart. And what what connected you and I was me creating additional content for Magic the Gathering, which we're both big
mhm.
Magic the Gathering fans as well. Coming together and talking Final Fantasy originally for that documentary series, and it was clear, man. I honestly like going back and looking at that that interview that I did for you of you, about Final Fantasy. It was just clear how much you love the game and your
Yeah,
insights to the game and to the world and stuff like that. And I felt like you and I hit it off really well, and that's what led us to not only our partnership with podcasting and stuff, but our friendship, and I'm truly grateful for that, man. It just shows like how connected we can be as Final Fantasy fans, right? Despite how I guess divisive we can be about the franchise in general,
yeah.
about what our favorite entries are and stuff like that, right? So Final Fantasy, man, I love everything Final Fantasy, and there hasn't been a Final Fantasy game that I've played that I've hated. Like there's always like there's been some that I feel were better than others. But even Final Fantasy X 2, which I think is a regrettable game, there were things about the game that I really enjoyed, right? So, with that being said, I do think that we should start out by just talking about like our favorite Final Fantasy entry. And so for a lot of people, their favorite tends to be the first one that they played, and for me, it is as an extension. So Final Fantasy VII Remake is my favorite entry into the Final Fantasy world. I think that knowing obviously the whole story of Final Fantasy VII, which we won't dive into that real quick, but I think if you just took Remake on the surface, it's a complete game from start to end. Like even though it leaves on a cliffhanger, it's a finished, polished game. What I love about Final Fantasy VII, the remake, is how they took what was ultimately only a few hours of gameplay in the original game and expanded it and opened the world to be so incredibly immersive, and the way it was structured, and Midgar, and your cast of characters, and the introduction, how they introduced Aerith, early on in the game, and how they brought Sephiroth in very early in the game where you don't see him in the original 7 for a while. Like I just thought it was just a masterpiece, and then you couple that on top of some of the music that they scored in addition to the game, bringing back some of the old music. I just think everything about Remake is phenomenal. But I also know there's a lot of people out there who think that Final Fantasy VII in general is overrated, whether it's its characters, its storyline, or things like that. And I got to tell you, I can see your point for people who do believe that. I can certainly see it, because there has not been another Final Fantasy franchise that has been forced down our throats than Final Fantasy VII. It is everywhere. And when you look at like my entry point into Magic the Gathering, what got me into it was the only thing I saw to begin with the games was Cloud. Cloud was everywhere when it came to
Mm-hmm.
those Final Fantasy MTG sets, right? And so I get it. I understand it is, but it is the most popular for a reason. And
Yeah.
I think in our society, especially with fans, there's such a toxic fandom. It's cool to hate on things, right? Like it's a cool
Yeah.
thing to do. And in a world where everyone's looking and striving for clicks and views, hating on shit is the easiest way to get you there. And I get it. That's fine. But I think at its core, man, I think Final Fantasy VII, although I do not think it is the best storyline of a Final Fantasy game, I think it is the best world building and structure with the most flushed out cast of characters that we have in a Final Fantasy game. Now, you can say, well, that's because they had all the time in the world. They did these remakes, they flushed out these characters. I get all that. But
Mm-hmm.
when you look at not only the characters you get, some of the mental health struggles you get with Cloud, I think is relatable for a lot of people. I think some of especially some of the storylines with Shinra, and hell, right before this, we were just talking about our current state of the country. You can't look at
Yeah.
Shinra and not think about our government, right? Right or
Yeah.
wrong, it is what it is. And then our love for the planet, like what are we doing to our world? And so for me, I think Final Fantasy VII, I think it's overrated for people because it hits close to home. I
Mm-hmm.
really do. Now, if you just don't like the game, if you're not a fan of the characters, you don't like the structure of the game, things like that, I get all that. That is fine. That no one's telling you have to. Um, but if you're just shitting on the game because you feel like it's a cool thing to do, then I think that you're missing out on immersing yourself in a very unique world that has not only a lot of great stories to be able to tell, but honestly, man, depending on where they want to go with this third installment of the remake trilogy, there's so much more that they can expand on, and there's so much lore there, even from a guy who tells like Zack is the most overrated character in Final Fantasy. um I still like the Zack character in this world because of how it sets up, what we get for Final Fantasy. So I think honestly, listen, Final Fantasy VII. If you think it's overrated, I'm not going to tell you you're wrong. I'm just going to tell you that if you think it's overrated because you're hoping it gets you clicks and likes, and you think it's the cool thing to do, you're missing out on something pretty unique. So, Dadman, what about you? What's your favorite installment of Final Fantasy?
So my favorite installment is Final Fantasy VIII. which is funny because it's not the first Final Fantasy that I really like played to completion. Final Fantasy VIII came out in 1998. I was 7 years old, so
Yeah.
I was still. I mean, I'm 35 now, and I still sometimes don't understand a little bit of Final Fantasy VIII because there's just so much going on
Yeah.
there. But it's my personal favorite. But my first like real like playthrough, like the game that got me obsessed with Final Fantasy as a franchise was 10, and I'm sure we'll talk about 10 at some point on this
Mm.
podcast. But playing and diving into Spira and like beating 10 on the PS2, now I'm like a little older, like I'm 10 or 11, you know, I can understand games a little better. And, you know, with the backwards compatibility, I just decided this is the one I'm going to try out. So I tried out 8, and I just went crazy with it. Like I had the guide and everything. I just wanted to understand that world, and I wanted to understand like the intricacies of all the systems, because there is a lot. Like Final Fantasy 8, it's probably it's probably the most underrated Final Fantasy. You know, you're talking about Final Fantasy VII being the most overrated. I think Final Fantasy VIII is the most underrated, and I think it's because people struggle with the systems of the game. Like it's not watered down. It doesn't hold your hand. Like there are a
Yeah.
couple of tutorials in the beginning of the game, and then that's really it. But the cool thing about Final Fantasy VIII for me, like after playing it so many times for so many years, is the level of freedom that you get in such a contained world. Like, okay, Final Fantasy VIII has not been re-released. There's been no remake. There probably never will be at this point. We did get a remaster, but it was just updated, you know, character models. Really, it wasn't like a full HD like remaster. And it was generated on a world that was powered by the PlayStation One. So as limited as that, you know, hardware was back in the 90s, it still offered this vast world of experimentation, which is it's such a departure from what we were used to, like coming from 6 and 7, and 7 just being the global phenomenon that it was. Like if it wasn't for Final Fantasy 7, uh JRPGs here in America would not be as popular as they are.
Yeah.
Final Fantasy VII is definitely like the granddaddy of pushing JRPGs into a more mainstream crowd, and I totally respect it for that. Um, but to me, like Final Fantasy VII is a much easier game to me. Like it's a lot more simple. Everything makes more sense. There is customization with your materia. There is customization with your party construction. But for the most part, I mean, Cloud's your damage dealer. You know, Tifa is gonna just be nuts with all the combos. Barrett's your long range guy. People hardly use Yuffie, even though I think Yuffie is the best character in the entire game, like mechanics wise and like battle wise. Um, People hardly use Vincent. People hardly use Red 13. It's like the same kind of construction. Final Fantasy VIII kind of takes it to like a different level because you can customize it, but you can also kind of just make everybody do everything. So there's no like traditional form of like a job system, because the junction system is so intricate in how it's tied to your stats. And I think the biggest issue people have with Final Fantasy VIII is it takes away your traditional like magic. Like you're not using magic with like MP or anything like that. It's a consumable item really. Um, but I kind of like that because it adds another layer to like the strategy behind it. Because if you use your powerful spells, you're taking away from your stats and your growth in the game.
Yeah.
There's just so much to it. Like, you know, everybody's so used to like level grinding and leveling up in Final Fantasy VIII. If you level your character in Final Fantasy VIII, you're making the game harder for yourself because the enemies scale with your level. So it's like it kind of like takes everything that JRPGs has taught you and just completely reverses it and is like, no, don't play the game this way, play the game this way. But at the end of the day, for me, like what I resonate with the most is Squall. I think Squall is my favorite Final Fantasy character. Period. I think he's. I mean, it's so subjective. Like you know, based off of how people feel about it, but I think he is the deepest Final Final Fantasy protagonist, like his character growth and his story arc to me, like from start to finish, really comes completely full circle. Um, which is nice to see. And at the time when I was playing the game, like I wasn't really a teenager just yet, but I could understand like the whole teenage angst and everything. And there's just a lot of emotional weight that goes into it. And I just connected with Final Fantasy VIII on like a more spiritual level. That's why it has such a soft spot in my heart. But I can look at it, if I remove myself from a situation, I can look at it and say it's not a perfect game. There are some issues with the game, but I think it's terribly underrated because of how different it is from what came before it.
Yeah, and I think that's the mark of a true fan is when you can be subjective about something that is your favorite installment, right? So like I mean I love Final Fantasy VII. But that being said, I would have much loved for Final Fantasy VII Remake to have been turn-based over the action combat that we got, right? Like there are things about it that I think that could definitely have been done better. And I think with eight, I think you're right, man. One, I think it is the most underrated installment of the franchise. But the Junklin system, man, it was just ahead of its time. Like I think if you try to roll that out now, I don't think it's going to near be as confusing for people as it was then. But to your point, like JRPGs weren't like they still weren't commonplace for us, in America at that time. So it was like, whoa, 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 like we love Final Fantasy VII. Why aren't you just giving us that? Well,
Hmm.
that's not what Final Fantasy is. Like Final Fantasy is so unique and different in every installment. And yeah, there are going to be things that are similar, and we're going to have similarities. But the fact is that for years, Square pushed the boundaries of what gaming was, and they were innovative, and they tried different things, and they weren't afraid to do something outside of the norm. And Final Fantasy VIII was just an installment of that just probably came 10 years too early, if we're being honest. Because I think if get away from the graphics, because graphics you still got to go back and have that expectation of it was made in 1994, I think, something like that, right? So it's still going to be old. uh, Take that aside from it, man, the cutscenes are still really good.
Yeah.
The storyline is still really good. And like most Final Fantasy games, you're gonna have more questions at the end of the game than you did before you started. But that is
Hmm.
that is the norm for Final Fantasy. So, but listen, Dadman, for us, like doing this Materia Junction podcast and our deep dive into the Final Fantasy, what are some of the things, man, you hope to be able to take away from this podcast? You and I have talked about having guests on. We've talked about just shared experiences with Final Fantasy or things like that. But before we get into like our main topic of today's episode, like if we're looking back, you know, 24 months from now, we get a couple of years in our belt for this podcast. Where do you think we're heading? What would you hope to get out of this?
I mean, for me, it's always been just sharing my enjoyment of things or sharing like my love and passion for a particular topic. I think a lot of the times, playing games, especially single player games, you tend to run into situations of isolation, because you're playing the game on your own. There's no
Yeah.
online like multiplayer aspect. There's no co-op aspect. You're playing it by yourself. So you're consuming everything on your own. You're analyzing everything on your own. You're digesting everything on your own, and then it ends, and it's like, okay, I want to talk about this with somebody, but like, who do I talk about it with? So like, that's always been like my problem. Like, I love talking about the things that I'm passionate about, but it's very difficult. Not that it's difficult, especially now because gaming is so much more mainstream, but also it's like gaming is mainstream, but like what types of games are mainstream? I don't really play like AAA titles like that. I don't really play like esports games. Like all these popular streamers are doing like Call of Duty or Fortnite or whatever. Like I'm still in a more niche category of gaming as a whole. Like under the umbrella of gaming, the games that I enjoy the most, like the single player narrative driven games, is still kind of niche, and then it's hard to find people to talk about it with, especially like to make sure that they've also played the same games as you, because like I have buddies of mine that have played tons of games but they haven't played through Final Fantasy games, so it's just like, ugh, I want to talk about this game. I want to like dissect it. I want to analyze it. Just in my nature, I'm a very analytical person, and I like to like dive into like the philosophy of everything and like what it means. And it's hard to find somebody to talk to about it. So for me, like honestly, like the thing that I'm looking forward to most is just having a conversation with you about something that at least you'll know what I'm talking about. Like we both have common
Yeah.
ground when it comes to it. And that to me is the best part about it is we get to share what we're passionate about. We get to bounce ideas off of each other. And you know what? You might have a perspective on something that I have never even thought about, and that might just continue to peel the layers back.
Yeah, man, I think that's well said. One of the things that I found so fascinating, man, when I was doing all those interviews for people, for Final Fantasy, was how much love people have for this fucking franchise. Like it is insane, the amount of time that we've invested into these characters in these games. And you think about it, like I haven't played every Final Fantasy game. I hope that's something I do want to be able to do. I want to be able to play at least all the mainline Final Fantasy games.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're talking about, let's just say an average of 60 hours per game, I've played probably 7, 8, or 9 of them. So I've invested 600 plus hours of my life
Mm-hmm.
playing these
Mm-hmm.
games. And I heard stories of people that were talking about how it got them through breakups, got them through their parents getting divorced, it got them through, mental health struggles that were going to lead to them even potentially taking their own life. But these games like saved them. And to
Mm-hmm.
me, that's fascinating. I mean, man, I love that. And I want to be able to have a platform where people can share that love for it, while also just being an advocate for the stories that these games tell. And just at the end of the day, take aside all the serious feelings of it, man, I just love to play video games. Like I did, and
Mm-hmm.
like you, I just want to be able to talk about these games. Like right now I'm playing through Final Fantasy 9, and I'm doing
Nice.
it through the kind of doing the quad 9 battle system with the hitting the speed run when I'm going into battles, because fuck, it takes so fucking long for those fucking battles to start. Like it's just so that is helping me get through. But I'm just playing it for the storyline, because for years I've heard Final Fantasy 9 has the best storyline of Final Fantasy games. And how I've gotten through without any kind of spoilers of Final Fantasy, I know nothing about how this game
Mm-hmm.
ends. Um, and what's awesome is that this game is, what, 20 years old, 20 plus years old, and I'm experiencing it for the first time now, and I'm loving it, man. I'm loving these characters, and except, listen, I don't know. I know you've played 9 a little bit. Zidane, he's an annoying little fuck. I I like, maybe things change. I'm only like 5 or 6 hours into it. Maybe things change, but Jesus, man, like I get it. Like you're a teenage boy, you want to get laid. Like I understand, I get it. We've all been there.
Mm-hmm.
But man, I will tell you right now, I will. It's a video game. I get it. I'll fuck someone up if they hurt Vivi. Like I am so attached to Vivi right now at this point, man. Like, and we're talking about video games, man. This stuff's so freaking cool. And so have you, without any spoilers, because I like I said, I'm still working my way through it. What do you think of 9,
Yeah.
man?
So I actually never completed like completely like I never beat 9 like myself.
Yeah.
I've seen what happens. Like I know the overall story, but like experiencing it myself, it hasn't happened yet. I got pretty far the first go around when I played it because I had it back when I had my PS4. Like they did the remaster of 8 and 9 like around the same time, so I picked up both of them, and like they had like the fast forwarding and the quad 9 damage and all that. So I was playing it, but like it was a little hard for me to get into it in the beginning, because the whole thing with 9 is it harkens back to like the first couple of ones where it
Mm-hmm.
gives you that more like four character party system, and like it really plays up the jobs and everything like that. So I hadn't experienced the Final Fantasy like that to that point, like starting with 7 and 8 and then 10, like like you don't really get that like old school vibe to it. So I kind of avoided it for the longest time. A really good friend of mine, Roberto, he was the one that like kind of put me on it. He was like, "Bro, you have to play 9. Like it's so good." Um, So I finally tried it and I did enjoy it. The systems were a little not confusing, but I just felt like they were just like uh what's the word I'm looking for? They were kind of just like they were so simplified to the point where it was kind of like I missed a lot of things like equipping the different skills. Like I didn't realize that once you mastered like the skill points, you didn't have to continue using the item that allowed you to use the skill. So I
Yeah.
was just like, well, how do I get new skills? And I didn't understand that. Like I a lot of times too, it's my fault because I just kind of skip through the tutorials and try to just figure stuff out. Because it's like I don't want to sit there and read everything. Like, bro, it's like 2015. Why am I reading all this stuff still? So I just like skip through it. But yeah, like as far as like where you are now in regards to your everything that you're saying, your opinions are going to change about everything. So story
I,
is really
I
really good.
I look forward to it, and I will say, man, there's as we kind of go into our main topics or whatever of this episode, and we start talking about Final Fantasy, where it's at now, where it needs to go. I do agree with you that some of the Final Fantasy games, there's too much exposition when it comes to the tutorials
Oh
and how to play. And I think that there are games that have shown that you can do it much better. And you're probably going to hear us talk a lot about Expedition 33 because it is
oh God,
honestly, I'm just going to be real. It's the best Final Fantasy game that wasn't a Final Fantasy game. And
100%.
it teaches you how to be able to play the game and how to use what are they called? They're not pesos. Is that what they're called?
Pictos,
Pesos. Pictos.
Pictos.
Yeah, pesos is Mexican money. Pictos. It teaches you how to use those without like you sitting there and reading, 5 pages of fucking notes, and so I think that
Yeah.
there are ways that it can definitely improve and yeah, I think the speed run is helping me just because I can go in combat and fuck shit up and I don't have to worry about it, but it's helping me to focus on the storyline. But yeah, I'm liking it so far. So question is to you guys though, if you're out there, you're listening to this, what was your entry point into Final Fantasy? Was it like us? Was it early on, 7 or 8? Dadman talked about living through that golden age of Final Fantasy, and I mean that's what a lot of us that are in our 30s, 40s like that. That's what got us hooked on the franchise was that stage
Mm-hmm.
between 6 and 10. What was really
Mm-hmm.
that mark, right? Are you a fan of the modern series? Like, what did you think of the last few installments in 15, 16, or the MMO of 14 and things like that? Let us know in the comments. We'd love to be able to hear from you. Talk about your entry point into Final Fantasy. So let's move into our main topic, Dadman. So we did a review, which by the time we air this will be posted up on the Batmandrew channel, Final Fantasy 16. And in that, we talked about some of our theories about how the game ended. And one of the theories you had, I've been absolutely obsessed with. And thinking about, especially especially in regards to the direction Final Fantasy should go or can go, with 17 and on. I think
Mm-hmm.
that it's a very interesting theory, right? So we're going to save the best for last. So we're going to get to that one here in a minute, but we're going to knock down a couple of the more like one, what I think is an original theory of mine. I haven't seen it elsewhere out there, but I'm sure it is. There's really nothing, very, very little that's original under the sun nowadays, right? But we're also going to talk about a couple of other big fan theories and kind of digest them a little bit and see what our thoughts are. So first one's first. I was just sitting around playing Final Fantasy 16. I thought to myself, what if all these games, the multiverse of Final Fantasy, 1 through 16, all the installments, what if it was just a kid at home named Cid playing with his toys, Toy Story style, if you will, with Andy and then Woody and Buzz, um, and all of this was just an imagination and made up into Sid's head, and all we're doing is living out his childhood imagination. Obviously, is that going to come to fruition? No, right? But it's just kind of a fun theory in my head and the way to kind of connect these games. Because even playing 9 right now, I mean, minor spoiler if you care about those kind of things, but Zidane walks into a weapon shop and he talks to a guy looking at some swords on the wall, and the guy says, yeah, I remember a spiky haired blonde guy that used to carry a big sword like that. Clearly talking about Cloud, right?
Right.
And so you see some of the connections. There's always a Cid, minus the first game. I don't think there was a Cid in Final Fantasy One, but there's always a Cid. There's always chocobos. There's always moguls. There's always airships, and vehicles of some form or fashion. And I sit there thinking, I was like, man, it's like it would be really cool, really like to just think about the fact that we're just all we're doing is living out the daydreams of some kid named Cid. And as you got progressive through the games, look at Final Fantasy 16, a very much darker tone, which kind
Mhm.
of to me represents where you went from where Sid's first entry, I believe it was in 2, to now in 16, the maturity level of a kid growing up, right? And so I don't know, I thought it was kind of a fun idea, about Cid and living out his imagination through the course of these games. But what do you think of the connective tissue, Dadman, of these Final Fantasy games? Why is there a Cid in every game, and is he of somewhat importance to the multiverse?
Well, first of all, I love your theory. I think that's such a cool theory. And it's so funny because so there is no physical representation of Cid in the original Final Fantasy. There's no character named Cid. But when you go to the village where you have to translate their speech, there's a one-off conversation with an NPC when they're talking about like your airship, and they say that Cid is the one who created the airship. So
Oh, okay.
there's no like actual character Cid in the game, but the name Cid is mentioned as the person who created the airship. So that's so funny you say that, like, oh yeah, what those are his toys and these are his little characters that he's making. Um, it's also really funny because the bad kid from Toy Story, his name was Sid too. So maybe Andy's over there playing with Woody and Buzz, and Sid's blowing shit up playing Final Fantasy in his closet or whatever, his room or
That's
whatever. But
fantastic.
I
That's why you get all
love
those
it
fucked
too
up, weird
because
looking monsters.
yeah, exactly. The
Yeah.
baby with the spider head,
Uh huh.
hey, those are the creatures.
Because listen, I will tell
But
you right
I
now, what is Marlboro? That thing's a fucking nightmare, man. Like that
oh
is
yeah, that thing is
so.
terrifying. But yeah, the other thing too is so funny because like you said, like as you get later into the franchise, like the titles get darker. And if you look at 9, we're just talking about 9, right? 9 is a lot more like coming off of 6, 7, and 8. 9 is a lot more lighthearted than those other three
Yeah.
because it's like paying homage to, like the original, but it's also like kind of dead center, like in the middle, which is like midlife crisis. So maybe Sid's going through his midlife
Yeah.
crisis. He wants to go back to his fairy tale like childhood, go to back to 9, and he gives us that. And then I think 10 is when he gets married and starts having kids because that story was just so freaking beautiful. Um, and then I'll blame Final Fantasy 13 on COVID because it was not the great. So maybe he was just kind of mailing it in a little bit. But yeah, I love that theory, man. I think it's so cool. And like I'm one of those people who like I understand that they say that none of the Final Fantasies are connected, but I think they are connected in some way. Like they have to be, I think.
Yeah, well, I mean, we're going to talk about that in a big way when we get to your theory at the end, but yeah, I agree, man. I think that even if they're just Easter eggs, which obviously there probably just are, I think the idea of there being a Final Fantasy multiverse out there. I mean, we've seen characters cross over in like side platform games and stuff like that, but to me the idea that this is a much bigger universe, I think, is really cool, and I think it opens up the doors for things that Square could do down the road. But talking about some of that cross-platform stuff, I heard this whenever Final Fantasy X-2 came out, but I don't think I got far enough into the game to have seen it or whatever. But in Final Fantasy X-2, apparently there is a Albed named Shinra in Final Fantasy
Hmm.
X-2, and the idea is that he extracted energy from the far plane, which eventually led into the Shinra Electric Power Company, and him being the founder. And in essence, the Farplane energy became Mako in Final Fantasy VII. So the theory goes is that Final Fantasy X-2 is nothing but a prequel set hundreds and hundreds of years prior to Final Fantasy VII. And when you think about it, I mean, I could see the connection in the dots. I honestly could, right? Like, I think that this theory is true. No, I think it was just an Easter egg, like most. But you look at the state of the world that you get, especially when you're in Midgar and they're draining the life out of the planet and things like that, versus what Tidus and Yuna and the rest of them, strove to fight for, and especially Waka and his hate for Machina and the Outbed and things like that. I could see the merit in this. I mean, the Outbed was all about machinery and things like that. So the fact that the Shinra Power Company was an origin of the Outbed, I could see that 100%. I really could. So have you heard this theory? And if you have, like, what are your thoughts about it?
Yeah, I've totally heard this theory before. I think it's super interesting, connecting Spira and I think it's Gaia in Final Fantasy VII,
Gaia.
like
Yep.
connecting those two worlds. It's also like if you're looking at party construction, I think if I'm not mistaken, I think both games have the same number of party usable party members. Because 10 has 7 party members or 6. 1, 2,
So
3,
you got
6.
Yuna,
6 party members,
Titus.
right?
Yeah, six. Yeah. Well,
And then
no.
7
So you got
has
Yuna, Titus, Auron, Waka, Riku, Kamari, and Lulu. So you got seven.
Okay, so you have 7, which is another
Yeah.
7, Final Fantasy
Yeah.
7. But
Yeah.
I think you also have the same amount of party members in 7 because you have Cloud, Tifa, Barrett, you have Red 13, Vincent, Cid, and Vince. I already
Yuffie.
said some. Cid and Yuffie is 7. You
Yeah.
have Aerith, but she dies. Spoiler alert. I think you have the same amount of party members, and you also have like if you look at the jobs, like or if you look at their classifications, you have similar classifications. Like Cloud and Tidus are the same. Yuna and Aerith are the same. Yuffie and Waka are like your long range characters. You could also throw Barrett in there as well. You have your dark characters like Vincent and Lulu. They're pretty the same. You have your Tifa and Riku are the same kind of like with their punching and fists and stuff like that. And then of
Yeah.
course you have Kamari and 13. Like they're both
Yeah.
dogs or cat or whatever they are, right? So there's a lot of similar parallels to it. It's also the development teams, right? The development teams are usually the same. Like if it's like Tetsuya Nomura, like he usually has like a lot of representation in his games. He did 7, 8, 10, and I think 15. So like those games are like very similarly like related to each other in certain ways. But I think it's fascinating. I think along the lines of like you said earlier, like there's a lot of Easter eggs sprinkled throughout that just kind of get our juices flowing as fans, which is it's genius on Square's part because they just want us to continue to have these conversations, right?
Yeah.
Um, but there obviously there's no like confirmation of it, but it's nice to talk about for sure.
Yeah. I think it's cool, man. And I think the fun Easter egg part was I had to look up the photo, but in the remake of Final Fantasy VII, there's a picture of clearly what is a Albed, um, uniformed wearing individual in the founding photo or whatever of Shinra Power Company. So
Hmm.
I think it's an interesting theory. I like it. I think it's fun to see those kind of connections and those dots, and I think that this again speaks to how they kind of connect these games and give us those fun little Easter eggs. But I will tell you the next theory that we're going to talk about. I need to replay. It comes from Final Fantasy VIII. I need to replay Final Fantasy VIII because it's been a long time since I've played that game. But with that being said, from what I remember from the game, I think I buy into this theory. I do. I really do. So we're okay. So this is the Squall is dead theory. So
Hmm.
in Final Fantasy VII, or excuse me, Final Fantasy VIII, at the end of Disc 1, Squall is impaled by Ida with a massive chunk of ice. And he wakes up in
Hmm.
Disc 2, and there's no wound and no explanation to his
Hmm.
his injury, right? Which
Hmm.
on the surface you don't think much of it because especially if you at the time, multiple disc was not commonplace. Final Fantasy VII did it, but it wasn't like every game did it. So I still remember opening Final Fantasy VIII and be like, "Holy shit, there's four of these discs! Like,
4,
oh my
yeah,
god!"
4 of them. Yeah.
And so getting done with that first disc, you're like, "Oh my god, what a cliffhanger!" You put in that second disc, you're like, "Oh, thank God he's alive!" Right? Like so. Um, but now as an adult, starting to think about that theory, Final Fantasy VIII, I think for me, it takes a lot of fucking weird turns after that second disc, man.
Yeah,
And
it
and
does.
I think it's wonky enough that um now the I guess the rebuttal to this theory would be okay, well in what purpose does that serve then, if he did die, and we still see everything kind of play out the way it does. So I don't have an answer to that, but I will tell you, man, like I remember playing that game as a kid and thinking, oh my god, they killed, did they kill the main character of this game at the end of disc one? And when you get towards the end of the game, this is where I need to replay it. My notes here are showing that the cinematic ending kind of shows a little bit of a fading of Squall as he kind of
Mhm.
passes away. So what are your thoughts, man? Here, this is your game. This is your entry and your love for Final Fantasy. Do you buy into this theory?
Uh, so there's another really big theory with Final Fantasy VIII that I buy into a whole hell of a lot more, and it's the Renoa is Ultimisia theory.
Mm-hmm.
That one to me is just that one is just like, and they like, even like the developers are like, no, that's not true, but like there's so much evidence like supporting that theory. The Squall is dead theory, not really. Like it's a very interesting theory, and you're right. After disc one, it completely goes on like a complete acid trip. I remember, funny story, playing it as a kid, seeing that cutscene and like seeing Squall get impaled with the ice. I thought like it was like a game over, and I had to reset the fight and do the fight all over again. And I
Yeah.
kept doing the fight, and like I didn't understand like why do I keep dying? Like, what am I doing wrong? And then just one day, like, I did the whole thing again, and like, I over leveled my characters. I was like, "There's no way I'm going to lose this fight." And then I got to say, and I just kind of walked away from the PlayStation for a little bit, and then I came back and it said, "Please insert disc 2." And I was like, "Wow, I'm an idiot." Like, whatever. Like, I guess I'll just do this and see where it happens. So yeah, I was relieved to see that start of disc 2. Like, he's good. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of like interesting tidbits there too. Like the whole first disc, like Squall is very closed off. He's very standoffish. He wants nothing to do with Renoa in that first disc, and then all of a sudden in disc 2, he's like falling in love with her. Obviously, Cypher's not really in the picture anymore, so it kind of like opens that up. But like it's an interesting theory. I don't buy into it as much because the whole point, like the whole storyline, it's a time travel thing, like with the whole time compression. I think like the ultimate pain of Squall, him being that quote unquote legendary seed, where you'll, if you play through 8, like Ultimisia will continue having the conversation like, oh, Squall, the legendary seed. I think they're in like a perpetual loop where they have to do this, they have to go fight Ultimisia, and it just keeps repeating constantly. So I think that's where you get all this distortion. I think really that time compression distortion that you see is just multiple attempts of going and beating Ultimisia. They're just kind of getting compressed into one, which is why you get all those weird like images, because multiple different timelines are trying to blend into this one timeline where they actually got it right. Which is, you could kind of like say the same thing about like Infinity War. Like Doctor Strange was like, I looked at 68 billion possibilities and there's only one. Or like if you watched the Flash movie where they're in that weird
Yeah.
paradox and they keep coming back to the same point in time. So I think Final Fantasy VIII has a fixed point in time, and I think that fixed point in time is when Edea kills Squall with the ice shard. So I think that up to that point, everything that has happened has to happen that specific way. And then going into disc 2 is where all of like the parallel timelines happen. So I think there are timelines where Cid failed and doesn't kill Ultimisia, and I think there are timelines where Cid succeeds and kills Ultimisia. But all those different attempts of her time compressing are just kind of blending into each other, and that's why you get the whole like, oh, I'll find you, come find me, don't forget me, remember me, and they go to that one specific spot
Yeah.
in time, not in like reality, but in time. They know where their safe spot is, and I think at the end of the game everything is fine. But that's where I kind of go off with that theory a little bit. It's very interesting, but I don't buy into that one as much as the Renoa is Ultimisia theory, but it's definitely a good conversation for sure.
I'm gonna need to do a deeper dive into the Renault Aires Ultimisia theory because I've
Oh,
heard it before.
it's so
I've heard
good.
it before.
It's
Yeah.
so good.
I
It's so
we
good.
might have to have like a editorial video on this podcast or something to go over that, because I've heard it before. I listen. I love the Renoa character. I think if I'm looking at, forget just female characters in Final Fantasy, if I'm talking about my five favorite characters of all time in Final Fantasy, I think Renoa is on that top five list. I really think that she is. Like, I love the Renoa character. Um, and so, I don't know. I just, in my head, I'm like, I don't want that to be true, because I love the character,
Yeah,
but
it's such a good
I could
theory
see
though.
it. So, but here's our main theory. Here's our main topic of this theory chasing, right? So, Final Fantasy 16. Now, if you want some more review of the game or whatever, like I said, you can go check out my channel. It's going to be up there on the Loot Drop playlist. But for all intents and purposes, Dadman, give us the cliff notes of what this theory is, but enough details so we can kind of flesh it out. So, what is your Final Fantasy 16 theory?
So when I first beat Final Fantasy 16, I love the story. I thought it was very good. I'm not really married to the whole action RPG thing. I'm more of a purist like you. I like the turn based stuff. I like the remake combat system. It kind of blends the two together, and maybe not unfortunately, but that's probably their direction moving forward. They're probably going to have that hybrid, like real time turn based mechanic going on. But to me, like Final Fantasy 16 didn't have a lot of like the basic Final Fantasy tropes. Like there was no MP bar, there was no like actual summons. There was, so to me, like that was the, chronologically speaking, that happens first. Like so, Clive's story happens first before any of the Final Fantasies, right? Because the whole 16 is destroying the Mother Crystals, and then the first Final Fantasy is them restoring the crystals to bring magic back and all that shit. So I thought, like, in my like tinfoil hat theory, like this is Square's way of showing us that they're going to reboot like their franchise now, which now, like, the longer we go without getting any information about Final Fantasy 17, the longer I think the truer I think it is. Like, I really do think, like, after we get the third part of the 7 remake trilogy, I think they're going to hit a huge reset, and I think the third part of the 7 remake trilogy is going to, like, kind of backdoor that in. I really do think they're going to reboot it. I think Final Fantasy 16 is going to be the last numbered entry that you see in Final Fantasy. Like, I don't think there's going to be a Final Fantasy 17. I think there's going to be a Final Fantasy, and then there's going to be like a subtext to it. And I think 7, the third part of 7, is going to like soft reboot everything, and then the next game will like hard reboot everything. And my whole theory behind that is because of the obsession with pop culture and multiverses. So we've always just kind of accepted the fact that Final Fantasy is an anthology series. Well, what if it's not? What if Final Fantasy, and obviously they didn't think about this back in the 80s, but now it can be easily written that instead of it being an anthology story, it's just a multiverse story. Um, and you have games like the Dissidia games where all the characters get together to fight one common enemy. So they kind of hinted at it a little bit of it being like a multiverse thing or like a one shot off thing. But that was my whole like theory about it, is that Final Fantasy 16 is the last game that we got, but it's really the first telling of the franchise. And then Civilization just rediscovering what Clive essentially really took away from the world, which was magic. So that was my like tinfoil hat. Like, this would be a perfect time for them to be like, okay, we're just gonna blow everything up. Final Fantasy is now a multiverse franchise instead of an anthology series. Here's your Final Fantasy VII remake part 3 game. Here's a little bit more into that. And I think because of how popular Sephiroth and Aerith are, I think they're going to be the two characters that really spearhead the cracking of the multiverse. I think I have a strong feeling, especially with the directions that they went in with Rebirth, that there's going to be an Aerith and a Sephiroth thing where something happens and it kind of cracks, like a la like No Way Home. It kind of cracks the fabric of reality, and then boom, here's this birth of this new inception of Final Fantasy.
So this is why I love your theory, right? Because one I think when you line it all up, it makes sense, right? And I'm sure that there's probably some bigger fan of Final Fantasy than us that's out there that's listening to this. Be like, you guys are fucking idiots. There's no way you could do it, tie into this, whatever,
I
right?
mean, we
Yeah,
could easily be stupid. Yeah.
but with that being said, I love the idea of this because that means that the developers, that Square, took a second and laid out a roadmap for where they wanted to take Final Fantasy. And that is something I don't think they've done in years, decades, even. I truly don't. We'll get into that, on our last topic about the current assessment of Final Fantasy. But I love the idea of them saying, hey, okay, we need a direction here, as opposed to just let's develop our next game and move on. Let's have a bigger perspective. And I think what holds merit to your theory is that right now Marvel has defined what cinematic universes should look like. DC's on their second attempt to try to make this fucking thing work for a shared cinematic
Mm-hmm.
universe.
Mm-hmm.
And losing, the millions and millions of dollars that they did on the Snyderverse didn't derail them. They're like, no, fuck it, let's reboot it all. Let's throw all of our money into the multiverse circle, right? People are dying for a shared universe of some sort, right? And I think what Final Fantasy has the opportunity to be able to do is to give us that shared universe without getting rid of their money makers, right? So you could have a world where, and because so I started thinking about this, right? I was like, okay, what characters would I love to see in other worlds? If you could take one character and interact them in a different world with another character, what two characters would I love to be able to see? And there's several, man. There are several. I I would love, like, for me, I think that the craziest Final Fantasy villain that's out there is Kefka. Like, I think
Mm-hmm.
he's obviously the most insane of all of them, right? I would love
Mm-hmm.
to see a Kefka in Spira. I would love to see that
Oh
world,
my god.
that peaceful world, like, because man, Kefka made Sin look like a little bitch. Like, if you really compare the two, and I know six is an old game, and if you haven't played it, understand that for me it's a difficult playthrough because of the graphics, right? But get past that, just the core of Kefka, man. Like, if you're a fan of Sephiroth like I am, like, you don't get Sephiroth without Kefka. Like, you don't. Like
Correct.
he is a fucking lunatic. I want to see that chaos in another world. With
Yeah, that would be
characters that aren't
crazy.
accustomed to that, right? I think that you have an opportunity here. What I don't want to have happen, though, is I don't want them just to say, "Oh, cool. Well, let's just have all these characters interact with each other without any clear direction or storyline." Right? I don't
Right.
play any of the games that have these shared crossovers or these shared characters. I don't give a fuck. Like, I'm here for the storyline. Give me
Mm-hmm.
a reasonable storyline. And to your point, yeah. So in my head, I was already thinking about that too. Okay, well, like, there's really not been much news or anything about anything past Final Fantasy III, the third installment of this remake trilogy. So
Mm-hmm.
what does that third installment look like, right? And I think if you're going to do this shared universe, if you're going to really open up a multiverse, I think you need a game entry to make it happen, not just the end tag of Final Fantasy VII 3. Um, but I do think that it's going to be like, is this all going to happen? Probably not. But in my head, I would love for it to. I
Yeah.
would love for it to be a Final Fantasy 17. But I agree with you. They're not there. I think they're going to scrap the number titles. Even if they don't do this, I think they're done with the number titles. I really do. So whatever Final Fantasy 17 ends up being, I think we're going to see a character we know. Um, Probably Cloud, even though I don't think that's the right move. As much as I love Cloud, I
Mm-hmm.
think it's probably going to be Cloud because he's arguably the most recognizable character, and I think it's going to be a standalone story of him that will ultimately open up the multiverse. And I think, to your point, which I'm at least I'm assuming, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but clearly there's a multiversal element to this Final Fantasy VII remake trilogy. Like the way
Mm-hmm.
that they did Rebirth, going back, especially at the beginning of the game, kind of showing an alternate reality of Zack and Cloud, right
Mm-hmm.
where they live,
Right.
where Zack
Right.
lives. Like clearly, there's a multiverse here. I think we're going to get the end of this trilogy. We're going to get a game that's just Cloud. Final Fantasy, Cloud reigns. I don't know. It's a fucking stupid title, but you get it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. No,
And
I got you.
I think it's going to be him seeking out, and I think that's going to be what opens up this whole world. And I think we'll see characters that we know from other installments throughout that story. But I think that's the vision I have. Now, with all that being said, people make a lot more money to do a lot more of this stuff storytelling than me. So I'm probably way off base, but I'm just thinking from a business standpoint because that is my
Mm-hmm.
background. Cloud's your most
Mm-hmm.
marketable character. He is. Him and
Mm-hmm.
Sephiroth, like my fucking kid knows who Sephiroth is and who knows who Cloud is, and like so these characters are so well known. That's your launching point, I think, if you're going to do something like that. Now, who I would love for them to do it with is Clive. I think you do a
Oh.
Clive standalone story. Clive wakes up, whether it's he wakes up on that beach where we think he dies, or
Yeah.
we fast forward in time. Maybe there's a little bit of amnesia or something that sinks in. He doesn't know who he is, and we get back into his story. That's who I would love to see that centered around because I think that he is a very underutilized character in his own game, if I'm being honest. Like I think that there was
Mm-hmm.
more they could have fleshed out in 16 with him. But that's kind of my thoughts. So with all that being said, do you have anything to add to your theory? Because I absolutely love the theory.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of like the direction that you're going. The Clive thing is super interesting. I was more along the lines of a completely new character, just like a new character. I don't know like how they would set it up, but this new character has to be like some type of like he has to have or he or she, probably she, because Final Fantasy does female characters really really good. So I would probably say it's a female protagonist that would be the spearhead to the multiversal um the multiversal like story. I would be okay with it not being an original character if it was a character from an existing property that had otherworldly elements. Like I don't think Cloud, as much as I understand the as much as I understand the marketability of Cloud, I don't think like flavor wise it makes sense because he is not like what's a supernatural character.
Yeah.
Like he's not like a Roth who has the Genova cells and is one with the life stream. He's not like an Aerith who was an ancient. He's not like, even if you go outside of Final Fantasy VII, he's not a Tidus who is not even a real person. He's just the dream of the faith. Like he's not that type of a character. So if they're gonna go, I mean the closest that you get if you're staying in Final Fantasy VII, the two characters that come to mind would be Aerith and Vincent because they have like otherworldly powers, like Vincent being the demonic character in Final Fantasy VII and Aerith being the angelic character in Final Fantasy VII. But Vincent and Aerith don't really have ties together as characters because
Yeah.
in the original game, by the time you get to Vincent, Aerith's already gone. So I don't even think they have any interactions. So it'd be very interesting to see how they spin it. Um, but yeah, I would be okay with it being an existing character if that character had some supernatural weight to it. Like as much as we don't even like, as much as Final Fantasy 13 gets shit on, I think Lightning would be a good character too because she started as the protagonist. She became a Lassie or Falsi, whatever, that she became
Yeah.
crystallized, and then she comes back. So she has that connection to both like the non-supernatural and the supernatural. So I would even be okay with it. I think that's a huge cop out, but I'd be okay with it. I think you'd have to go something original. And I think the reason you have to do that is because Square is struggling to attract the younger audience, and they need to give the younger audience a character that they can now grow up with, because all of the Final Fantasy fans that we have that are playing the Final Fantasy games are us, the people that grew up with it and are now adults. Like there's not a lot of the younger generation that is growing up with Final Fantasy because it's not what it used to be. Like you're talking about Final Fantasy games are coming out like 5 years apart. Like that's not
Yeah.
how it was. Like you got a new one every year because there was different teams that were working on it. So I think you need to make a new character. I think you need to start fresh. I think you need to get back to your roots. Um, I honestly think that if it wasn't for Clair Obscure Expedition 33, we wouldn't be having this conversation. If an old system game like that wasn't as successful as it was, it probably wouldn't have forced people to make changes. So I think there's a lot of moving pieces, but I'm very interested to see where it goes.
I agree. I agree. And honestly, like, so I thought about Lightning when I was thinking about like where does that launchy point look like? And listen, I'm sorry. Like, first of all, I like the Lightning character. You know, the games weren't great, but I like the Lightning character. But she is just Cloud with boobs. They are
That's
so
fair.
much the same. But
That's very
I do
fair.
get the supernatural element that you're talking about. Um, and so, you know, what don't give us a Cloud Lightning team up game, because that would just be nothing but 60 hours of broodiness and, you know, fucking I don't know. I don't think I could do that. So, you know, don't do that, Square. But I
Yeah.
like the idea. I do like the idea of Lightning. And so, all right, listen, guys, what are your thoughts of all these fan theories? You know, these multiversal theories, things like that. What are your thoughts? Like, I would love to be able to kind of keep the conversation going in the comments. Throw it down below. Let us know. One of the things that we are very much going to do on for this podcast is we're going to be active with you guys in the comments. We're definitely and listen, we're not you know too shy from, if you throw something out there that really piques our interest and we want to talk about, that we'll just fucking bring your ass on the show and let you plead your case, right? If you turned out to be, you know, some kind of crazy, you know, psychopath, then that's on us. We'll own that. That's fine. But aside from that, you know, like, throw out your theories. We'd love to be able to hear them. Put them in the comments below. So, Dadman, this brings us to our last topic of the day: the future of Final Fantasy. So we kind of laid into it a little bit with your multiversal theory there from Final Fantasy 16. But
Mm-hmm.
in your words, what do you believe the current assessment is for Final Fantasy as a franchise? Where are they at? And more importantly, what do you think their success blueprint needs to look like? Because I think the one thing we can both agree on is that they are no longer on top of the world. Like, they are
No,
still relevant, but they are not on top of the world. So, what is the current assessment for you, and where do you think they need to go?
it's such a tough question to answer because as a selfish fan, as a gamer, as somebody who has grown up with the franchise and still enjoys the franchise now, the easy answer for me is just go back to your roots. Just give us what worked and just give it to us more consistently. You know, obviously I don't expect a brand new Final Fantasy game every year because of the way technology has advanced so much. These things take time, but I don't want to wait 5 years in between titles. Like 16 came out 3 years ago,
Yeah.
right? And we have heard nothing about Final Fantasy 17. Nothing. So that to me is a problem. But also, like, that's the selfish fan in me. If I'm looking more in the business perspective and what's going to make them money, they need to connect with a broader demographic. They need to connect with the younger audience. They need their games to be streamed on Twitch. They need their games to get a lot of clout on social media. Um, they need that because, like you said, Square Enix is no longer the top dog. It hasn't been in a long time. And if you look at their roadmap the last couple of years, they've just made re-releases to existing games. Like
Yeah.
a lot of the hype this year was Dragon Quest VII. And listen, I'm a big Dragon Quest fan too, but you're just re-releasing an older game. You know, they did the HD remaster for Dragon Quest 1 and 2. Now they have the reimagining for Dragon Quest 7. There's no new real property. And I'm okay with games being remade, but you also have the other school of thought where you have fans who have been clamoring for certain games to get remade and they're just ignored. Like, obviously, I would selfishly love a Final Fantasy VIII remake. That would be amazing. Why Final Fantasy IX hasn't gotten remake treatment yet, I have no clue. I think that should probably get a remake. You have games like Chrono Trigger. Chrono Trigger is probably the greatest RPG of all time, like the greatest RPG ever made. Um, Objectively, it's not my opinion. It's just like if you look at people's lists, that's always like top three. Why hasn't that game got remade? But they're remaking Dragon Quest 1 and 2. Okay, fine. And then they're jumping to 7. But they remade 3 a couple. It's just like there's no like consistency with your direction here, right? Um the other thing too is you have your backup franchise with Kingdom Hearts. Like I don't know if you've played any of the Kingdom Hearts games, but Kingdom Hearts is also a very successful franchise that started going downhill after Kingdom Hearts 2. Especially now with licensing and different IPs. What made Kingdom Hearts so popular was the merger of Final Fantasy characters with Disney characters. That's what made it appealing to people. And on paper, people were like, that's not going to work, but it worked because you got 1 and 2 and you got prequels and you got sequels and then you got 3. But now Kingdom Hearts 4 has no Disney ties to it. It's just Kingdom Hearts. It's its own IP now. But they also took Final Fantasy characters out of Kingdom Hearts 3. There was no Final Fantasy characters in Kingdom Hearts 3 from what I was told. I didn't play Kingdom Hearts 3. So there's a lot of difficulties with how big these IPs have become where they can't just say, yeah, let's just do everything because they can't anymore. That's not how it works. But if I'm being honest, if they figured out a way to do this multiverse thing, because that's what's really big in pop culture right now, if they figured out a way to do this multiverse thing and they got a lot of buzz about it, not only are you going to attract the older fans, but you're going to attract a lot of the newer fans that have grown up with the MCU being a multiversal story. So yeah, I mean, I would love to sit in a room with them and just have a conversation and see, like, I mean, obviously that would never happen, but just to see where their heads are at as a fan of the franchise for a long time, um, because it's concerning to me that um, this company started by throwing a Hail Mary, became a juggernaut, and is now kind of getting phased out. So I don't want to see Final Fantasy disappear. I still want it to be a thing, but they definitely need to, they definitely need to pick up the pace a little bit.
So I'm in total agreement, and so I'm gonna try not to like. I'm very passionate about this specific topic because I love these games. I love Square. I think that I think when you look at video games now, when you look at games like Clear Obscure, Expedition 33, you wouldn't get that without the roadmap that Square has laid out for RPGs, especially here in America, right? So
Mm-hmm.
so I say this because I love Square. I love the franchise of Final Fantasy, but you are stuck in a rut. You have a severe identity crisis, and I think it stems from the fact that you over the last 5 to 10 years have had some leadership changes in your executive
Mm-hmm.
offices that quite haven't hit, and that happens. I get that, right? But the problem is that you took away, at least it feels like it anyways, part of the thing that made Final Fantasy special, and that was allowing creatives to do their thing, giving us storylines that weren't mainstream necessarily. Like I know we're talking about the multiverse thing, but you spent years developing storylines that held a mirror up to the world and
Mm-hmm.
forced us to look at issues that we didn't want to talk about, and us as adults, as kids, being informed about those issues, learning about Shinra, who was sucking the lifeblood out of the planet, and how that government 30 years later is way more relevant than it should be, from that point.
Mm-hmm.
Like you have stopped telling good storylines that allowed us to be able to be thought provoking. Final Fantasy 16, I loved. I love Clive. I love the storyline. Like I enjoyed it all. But if you stack that story up against, stories of 7, 8, 9, 10, it's all Final Fantasy 16 is just another story about a guy going through his shit, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
it was personal because I'm a guy who goes through my shit. Like I was
Yeah.
relatable to him. But like if you were trying to get like my wife to play Final Fantasy and she started with 16, she's gonna enjoy it because you gave us that Game of Thrones vibe, and she likes that Middle Earth type shit, but it wasn't a good story for her to
Mm-hmm.
be attached to for the next fucking 20 years, like you did for us when we were entries into the Final Fantasy franchise. So quit fucking it up. Like I don't like telling a
Mm-hmm.
good story is hard to do. I get that,
Yep.
but it's even harder when you don't allow your creatives to do their job and to do what made you successful. So I agree with you. Go back to what made you successful. Tell good, intriguing stories that held a mirror up to the world. I think there's two other things that they really need to do if they really want to make this thing successful. Is they have to revolutionize gaming again. Final Fantasy VII, Final Fantasy VIII, Final Fantasy IX, Final Fantasy X. These were all games that pushed the gaming genre forward. And I mean, hell, PlayStation wouldn't be PlayStation if it hadn't been for Final Fantasy VII and for Final Fantasy X. Like we wouldn't have the juggernaut Sony has if it hadn't been for those two franchises. No one,
Mm-hmm.
you are so irrelevant, and I hate to say this, you are so irrelevant. Sony's okay with not having exclusivity of your game anymore. Like that is how irrelevant you are as a industry. Like you're a moneymaker for sure. But you can't tell me that if you were really that top dog, Sony wouldn't be like, nope, you're sticking with us, right? Because
Yep.
you don't see the Last of Us franchise going anywhere. Like you don't see Red Dead, or not, excuse me, not Red Dead, the Uncharted franchise, like Horizon Zero Dawn, like all these Sony made properties, that like they're stuck with Sony. And I get that Final Fantasy isn't a Sony product, but Sony has enough fucking money to be able to say, no, you're staying in house. You're staying with us. But they
Mm-hmm.
don't care. They don't care
Mm-hmm.
because they know that it's not as relevant. So you've got to be able to start moving the gaming industry forward. And I think you do that in one way, one huge way. You perfect turn based. Like we have had so many variations of turn-based combat over the years, and I agree with you. You've said this before on my channel, and I 100% agree. The best turn-based combat we've ever gotten was Final Fantasy X.
One
You
hundred
mix
percent.
Final Fantasy X with what Expedition 33 did and the
Oh my god.
theatrics of the game, man, that is, now you are the bar, right? You are the
Mm-hmm.
bar. But right now, when I think of turn-based combat, when I think of any combat, I'm thinking Expedition 33. And you're talking
Hundred
about an
percent.
independent studio who made the game at a third of the price that you make your fucking games. You are
Mm-hmm.
too big for your own success. Like, and you've got to bring it back down to what made you successful. To your point, Dad, man. But I think the last one, and we've already hit this on the head about, getting away from the titles, the numerical titles and things like that. There's an idea amongst Final Fantasy non Final Fantasy fans that they still don't know these are all individual self-contained stories. They think if you play Final
Right.
Fantasy VIII, you got to play the other seven before you do that, right?
Correct.
And so get away from the numerical order, reboot your franchise. And I will tell you, I agree with you. I would love, the number one game I'd love to see remade is Final Fantasy VIII. I think there's so much story there, so much you can do there. You start with remaking Final Fantasy One. You showed
Oh
in
yeah,
Final
that would be
Fantasy VII.
sick.
You showed in Final Fantasy VII that you can take a very streamlined story, because the original Final Fantasy VII was not near as complex as you've made this story in these remake trilogies. You can take very little and make it into a lot. You flush out Final Fantasy, the original, just no Final Fantasy One, none of that shit. Just your next release, Final Fantasy, and it is nothing but the core and the heart, and the nostalgia that you got in 1987, and you bring that
Mm-hmm.
to real world graphics now. You bring that to innovative storyline and storytelling, character development, make us fall in love with these four warriors of light, and then give us the
Mm-hmm.
ability to be able to customize our journey the way you did in 1987. You are going to find yourself pushing the industry forward. But here's why you're not going to do that. Like Square, no one's listening to this. I get it. But if you are, this is why you're not going to do that, because you're too scared to. You're too
Yeah,
scared
that's
to.
what it is.
You're too scared. I heard that. I don't know if this is true or not, so I apologize if I'm giving out false information. But I heard that Final Fantasy 11 is still, like, you still have to pay a subscription in order to play it. So if that's the case, you are trying to squeeze out every fucking penny you can. And that's why you're scared to be able to push the gaming industry forward and do something with your franchise, because you're afraid you're going to lose money. And I'm sorry, but 39 fucking years ago, you said the hell with it. We're going to make the game we want to make. And if it's the last one we make, so be it. Here's Final
Yeah.
Fantasy. and it's what made you successful. Don't just throw everything out. I get it. Like, you've got your company, you have employees, you got to make sure that you're being financially responsible, but that doesn't mean you don't roll the dice every now and again. And you're at a point right now where no one cares about Final Fantasy 17 except for, like, idiots like you and I who love the franchise and we're going to play no
Right.
matter what. But the
Right.
core audience, they don't care about Final Fantasy 17. They don't. And so
They
give
don't.
us Final Fantasy. Remake that first one. Whether you tie in all the stuff we're talking about, multiverse and stuff like that, that's obviously up to you. But remake Final Fantasy and start a whole new generation. Because if you do that, let's say Final Fantasy comes out, the original, they remake the original. Let's say they're in pre-production now with it. Let's say we get it in 4 years. So in 2030, my Grayson, is going to be 9. That is a perfect entry point. That's where we started. That's where we started. Get him. Don't make it, immature. Like, don't like. I think you need to make sure that it is. It doesn't have to be E for everyone, but it doesn't need to be
T
Game
for
of
teen.
Thrones.
That's
Yeah,
safe.
exactly. But you have an opportunity to bring in a whole new franchise, and then guys like us, oh yeah, we're gonna fuck it. You're gonna remake Final Fantasy 1. They take my money.
Sign me
It
up.
is it
Take
is
my
yeah,
money.
day one drop, 100%. I'm taking a week's vacation to play that fucking game.
Yeah.
So those are the 3 things I honestly think that they need to do. I think they need to get back to innovative storylines, and how you do that in a Final Fantasy 1 remake. I think there's so many different ways you can, but you need to get to a story that holds a mirror up to the world. You need to push the gaming industry forward by perfecting turn-based combat, and you remake Final Fantasy 1. That if I'm sitting in the office of Square Enix, I'm like, hey, this is my three pillar plan for success here. And then they're going to tell me you're a fucking idiot, get lost. We're gonna, remake Final Fantasy 13. So, like, which no one's asking for, right? That's what they're gonna do. So I don't know. I Dadman, what do you think? What, like, do you
Yeah.
in 4 years from now, when we finally get some news about a new Final Fantasy title, are they listening to us? What are they doing?
It's so funny because a couple of the things that you said right now, like I hadn't really thought about, but like I think I think the world that we're in right now with like the AI and RAM and storage bubble, I know it makes it difficult, for developers, especially like, gaming and stuff like that. Like they're raising the prices of the PS5s and all that. Like I get all that. As a consumer, it sucks, right? But I think you need to get back to like what we said earlier. You need to get back to what works. And, we did a podcast a while back, talking about the first Final Fantasy game and how it was like their Hail Mary because it was make or break for them. I think they need that sense of urgency again. I think they need that desperation again. They need to feel what that's like, because out of that desperation came Final Fantasy 1.
Yeah.
And it was a juggernaut. Like Square just kind of took over RPGs. Like, yeah, you had Dragon Warrior, which is now Dragon Quest, but they didn't have that. It was first person. It was like first person view on the enemy, not that side scroller type shit. So I think you go back to that, and I might get flack for this, but I think the console exclusivity thing is super important too. Like, I think, like you said, if you want to be relevant, like it sounds horrible, but like you want your game to be so good that you're forcing people to go buy the game because they have to. It's one of those games like you have to play this game. So, okay, well, how do I play this game? Well, you can only play it on a PlayStation.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so then I know it's like the idea sounds completely backwards to what we as gamers want. Like we want availability and we want easy access, but there was a time where you didn't have that. You had to make your choice. You had to choose between Sony, Microsoft, and Nintendo. Like you had to choose. Now, granted, the financial landscape was totally different, where it was feasible to be a multi-console household. Like I grew up on Sega, and then Sega kind of went away, and then it was Nintendo for a little bit. But when the PS1 came out, I had every single Sony console. I didn't miss any in between. I had 1, 2, 3, 4. I had 5, and then my secondary console. There was a secondary console, and one year was the Nintendo GameCube, and the next year was the Xbox. So it forced you to have multi consoles because of the exclusivity. Now, the only companies that still do that are Nintendo and Sony.
Yeah.
Microsoft is completely out of that. Like, they don't do exclusivity anymore. And we see what has happened. It's completely killed Microsoft. So I think if you get back into that world of exclusivity again, I think it shows people that you're taking it seriously. Like, listen, we understand that you don't have a PlayStation, but if you want to play this new Final Fantasy game, you're going to have to get a PlayStation. Or you're going to have to wait a year for us to put a PC port out, because that's what they do with everything now. So I'm okay with kind of going back to that if it's going to propel Final Fantasy back to relevancy. If it's just for a cash grab, then I can care less. But I think you need to go back to the roots. I think you need to go back into doing what works. I think you need to think about exclusivity again. And you know what? Talking about all this multiversal travel stuff, people forget the original Final Fantasy was a time travel story.
Yep.
There's no reason the Warriors of Light can't be your vessel for your multiversal story. And there's no reason that the Warriors of Light can't branch off into different worlds of Final Fantasy to try to piece the multiverse back together.
Could you imagine? Okay, so all right, so I don't mean to interrupt you, but my mind was just blown. So there's 4 crystals in Final Fantasy, the original Final Fantasy movie, or Final Fantasy game. And for those of you who haven't played it, basically your journey is going to collect those 4 crystals, and then you find out that now you got to travel through time and you got to jump ahead 2,000 years, right? What if Final Fantasy 1, the remake, to retrieve each one of these crystals, similar to the Infinity Stones, and how if you pluck one out of a certain timeline, the timeline branches. If every crystal, you don't have to do every entry of the Final Fantasy universe, but if Final Fantasy VII, Final Fantasy IX, Final Fantasy X, and Final Fantasy 16 were all represented one of your 4 crystals, and you had to go interact with those worlds, and that's what ultimately branched in your, like, bro, that would just, like, to me, and then you have the opportunity to be able to enhance the storyline of a game that the story is pretty simplistic in Final Fantasy 1. It is. Get a chance to be able to enhance that. You bring in your multiverse together. You get your fan service by seeing some of these characters. But to your point, you get to make original characters, because in Final Fantasy 1, the characters, we made up the names. Like, there's nothing special about those characters.
There's nothing special about them.
So you give us four characters that we love, and by the end of it, that we're so attached to, and then you fucking do something crazy like kill one of them off. Like, I don't know, man. Like, to me, it just, like, that just seemed like an amazing way to be able to do this.
Yeah, I mean, it's not impossible too, because if you look at the, and it always blows my mind, right? If you look at the Black Mage sprite from Final Fantasy 1, it's Vivi.
Yeah.
It's essentially Vivi. Like, it's the same thing, right? So what's stopping you there? Your White Mage sprite from Final Fantasy 1, you're playing Final Fantasy 9. So the first time you see Garnet, she has that hood with the red trim on it. That's your White Mage. So it's definitely possible to just get a good group of writers together and just be like, listen, how do we fix this for 2028, let's say, or let's say 2030, whatever the 40-year anniversary of Final Fantasy 1 is 2027. That's the 40-year anniversary. So that's next year.
Yeah.
Your time's a ticking, because there is no better time. The stars are aligned. There's no information in the pipeline right now. You know we're going to get the third part of Final Fantasy VII sometime this year in 2026, probably going into the early 2027. But what if you end 2027 with, boom, here's your reboot. You fuckers were talking shit about us. Here it is. 40th anniversary of Final Fantasy 1. We're rebooting the entire franchise. We have this whole new outlook. We're gonna go back to what works. We're gonna listen to the fans. We're gonna include everybody, the old heads and the new heads. And I think there's no better time to do that than within the next year or two, because Square loves doing shit when they hit milestones. They
Yeah.
love their milestones. They fucking love their milestones. So what better milestone than the 40th anniversary of the longest running anthology series? You put a bookend on your you put a bookend on your piece of history with Final Fantasy 16. That is your little blip. That's over. Now here's this new fresh coat of paint on it. And like you said, you make us give a shit about, well, it's 6 characters really, because you had the warrior, the
Yeah.
monk, the black mage, the white mage, the red mage, and the thief. So it's 6 characters. You give us the 6 original warriors of light, and there are 6 crystals, because there's water, fire, or there's the ice crystal, the fire crystal. Yeah, water, fire, earth, and wind. And then you have the black crystal, which is the darkness crystal,
Yeah.
and you have the holy crystal, or whatever, the light crystal. So you have 6 crystals. And yeah, I mean, it could be a fetch quest. The first part of the game, you do the whole spiel. You go fight Garland, you save the princess, you activate the first 4. But when you go back in time to fight the original Garland and kill him off before he loops, something happens. You get separated, and here, oh shit, the warrior ended up in Final Fantasy VII land, and the black mage ended up in Final Fantasy IX land because he looks just like fucking Vivi. There's so many ways to do it, and it's not impossible, but they have to want to do it. That's what it
Yeah.
is. And that's a big risk that they're probably not going to take, like you said.
Man, it'd be great if they did. Listen, guys, this is the part of the episode where you have found your mogul. Mogul. We're gonna get this right. First episode, you found your mogul. Listen, I think is a very unique save point for Final Fantasy IX. That's why I encapped it with this. So this is the part where we save our progress and we sign off. So, Dadman, it's been a pleasure. First episode with you, my friend. Where can people find you on
Oh yeah.
social media?
So you can check me out on YouTube. I haven't been posting as of recently. It's very busy in my household with baseball season, but once I can get some time, I have a lot of ideas in the pipeline that I'm pretty sure people are going to enjoy. But you can definitely check me out on YouTube. That's probably the main thing. Yeah, I mean, there's a couple things on there for you guys to check out. But in until the meantime, just check us out here on the podcast, and we'll go from there.
Absolutely. And you can find me on social media platforms at the Batmandrew. And yeah, like this has been a great first episode. So, but it's all about you guys, the fans. So walk us through, what do you think of some of the fan theories? What do you think of the direction for Final Fantasy, and how do you like our thoughts about where the franchise should go? But more importantly, I want to hear what your entry point of Final Fantasy VII was, especially if it was not one of the mainstreams, if it wasn't number 1, 7, 8, 9. Like, if your entry was Final Fantasy IV, I want to hear that. I want to hear why it was special to you, for sure. So drop those in the comments. Teaser for next episode. I'm thinking we didn't plan any of this out in advance. That's how much we care about this podcast. We have nothing planned after this episode. Final Fantasy One review. Start there.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Okay.
Yeah, we can start there for sure. Yep.
We'll start there. Final Fantasy One review, our deep dive into Final Fantasy One, and listen, despite the fact that it's a 40-year-old game, there's a lot to dive into in that game for sure. So, guys, signing off here. The light of the crystals may be dim, but listen, the data is written. So, for all the warriors of light out there, don't forget to make sure you save your progress. This has been Materia Junction. Thanks, guys.